Invest 93L with a chance of developing into a tropical system of note down in Central America, but mostly calm here in the tropics, thanks in part to the arrival of Saharan dust. What you need to know, plus a live Q&A coming your way here on Tracking the Tropics, powered by Handyman Roofing. Hey there to you folks. Happy Wednesday. JB Buno here with you in your hurricane headquarters alongside Tracking the Tropics meteorologist Amanda Holly. We're going to see in just a moment. Rebecca Barry there on the right side of your screen. We've also got joining us from WGNO, chief meteorologist there, Hank Allen, friend of the program here on Tracking the Tropics. You can use any of the hashtags on your screen. We're going to get to your questions in the Facebook Live comment section as we do here in just a moment on Tracking the Tropics. But the aforementioned Amanda Holly standing by at the wall for the very latest on 93L and a little bit of Saharan dust arriving here.
That is right. This time of the year, early June, mid-June, it's nice to be talking about Saharan dust because it does keep things a little bit quieter. But we are tracking an area of low pressure here in the southwestern Caribbean that the National Hurricane Center continues to monitor. It's just an area of showers and thunderstorms basically at this point, and chances for development continue to lessen. We're looking at a 10% chance over the next 2 days and a 20% chance over the next 5 days as it kind of meanders off to the west-northwest over the Bay of Campeche here and the Yucatan Peninsula and into the Bay of Campeche. Regardless, doesn't look like it's going to impact the United States, but it does look like it's going to bring some shower and thunderstorm activity to the southern portion of Mexico. Right now, it's just a tropical wave. And again, really just a low chance of development. And that is in part due to that Saharan dust. But because it is an invest, the National Hurricane Center has been investigating it and keeping an eye on it, right? The hurricane hunters actually were supposed to investigate it today as well. We get forecast models, and those give us a sigh of relief as well. It's going to meander off to the north and then kind of take a westerly turn. There's a couple reasons for that, mainly because of a lot of the heat that people have been dealing with across the center part of the country and the southeast. There's a big ridge of high pressure centered off to the north that's basically blocking it from coming any farther to the north. We're also talking about it, whatever it becomes, staying very weak, and that is thanks to the Saharan dust. This is a current look at the Saharan dust plume. It's really thick in the western Gulf of Mexico here, but we do have some lingering effects of that dust over the Florida and in through the southern Gulf states as well. And that is where Chief Meteorologist Hank Allen is at WGNO in New Orleans. I want to bring you in, Hank, because you've been dealing with this dust just like we have been in the Tampa Bay area for the past couple of days. We can see it. It's hazy out there.
Yeah, boy, you're right about that, Amanda. And this is, I think, probably one of the more substantial batches of this dust that we've had move in. You know, you had that first wave a couple weeks ago. We had some rain around. You could see it a little bit, but not too much. But you mentioned the combination of that high pressure, I mean, just stagnant air. So there's not really much wind to move this around. And so we've just been baking with sun and heat over the past few days. And you're driving around out there, and it's just a haze, not just in the sky, but even at ground level here. And, you know, I think this is a bit more impactful for a lot of people, maybe with allergies or respiratory issues or coughing or something like that, than a lot of these batches we've seen in the past, because this is a pretty thick batch of it, and it's pretty visible out there for sure.
Yeah, and you've got some pictures to show us here in just a few minutes. I'm sure everyone across the southeast has really taken note of this Saharan dust because it makes it really hazy out there, and it really just adds to that heat that we are dealing with. But again, the Saharan dust helps to keep tropical development at bay because in part it is dry air and dusty air, and of course those tropical systems, they need a lot of moisture to develop. Look at the forecast of Saharan dust. There's another large plume out in the Atlantic that will move in our direction as well, and looks like it's going to settle into the Gulf of Mexico. Not necessarily move into the southern United States. We'll keep an eye on it, but for now, the tropics do look quiet besides Invest 93L, but those chances are low. This is what we expect this time of year. June, July, it's not a lot of development out there, but this is exactly where we look in this early in the season, closer to home. We've got warm Gulf waters, warm Caribbean waters, and this is where the tropical development occurs this time of year. Now, when we get to July, we start to zoom out a little bit more, but overall, the activity still remains on the lower side. It's not until, as you all know, if you've been with us now for 4 seasons, August, September, and October get really, really busy. So we like the quiet periods, and we'll take them while we can because we got a long season to go. But you know, folks, we'll be here with you every single Wednesday tracking the tropics. I'll send it back over to you, and we'll take a look at some of those Saharan dust pictures.
Yeah, really looking forward to sharing these photos. In fact, why don't we get right to them? You see WGNO Chief Meteorologist Hank Allen there on the right side of your screen alongside Rebecca Barry. Hank, let's get to some of these pictures that you just sent us a few moments ago. What are we looking at here? These are really great shots.
Yeah, these are from our news director, Rick Urbach, who, sort of took on the photography hobby here a few years ago and actually takes really good shots. So I had him send these to me. They took last night. These are just from yesterday evening's sunset. And this is looking over Lake Pontchartrain. So, of course, if you look at southeast Louisiana, you have that big body of water right in the middle here that, of course, is on the north side of New Orleans. That is Lake Pontchartrain right there. That long bridge is the causeway. So longest continuous running causeway or bridge in the country, and I believe still in the world. There was a bridge in China, I think they added, that may have beat it, but at least in the U.S., that's your longest continuously over water bridge. And so you can see the impacts there of the dust, pretty pink shadings in that color at night there as the sun is going down behind that cloud. But really, these shots right here of the sun itself, I mean, it gives you an idea how thick this dust has been, especially that one right there. You can't even see the bottom of the sun. Notice how it's not even really that close to the horizon. So all that is that Saharan dust layer that we're talking about. Like I mentioned, this is I think one of the biggest batches, if not the biggest, that we've seen over the past couple of years. This stuff is really thick out there. It gives you those pretty sunsets, pretty sunrises, of course, with the colors in the atmosphere. But, we've had the air quality alerts over the past couple of days because of this, as I'm sure many areas have. And so it has been a big batch of it, but some really neat shots there from yesterday evening.
Yeah, they are some great shots. This is my personal favorite here in the center of your screen. While we've got the entire team here with you for this episode of Tracking the Tropics, let's start our meteorologist Q&A. You guys know how it works. If you've been with us before, use a hashtag, ask a question out of the Facebook Live comment section. We start with David Fassel here, hashtag HeyJB. We'll go to Rebecca Barry for this one. Is the dust worse this year compared to last year, Rebecca?
No, we actually had some pretty healthy plumes last year as well, but just like Hank and Amanda were talking about, this is one of the healthiest plumes we've seen this season so far. This is typically the time of the year that we have this type of activity occurring across the Atlantic and across our area, and so this is pretty typical for us. It's really nice to see that compact ball, though, right over the Gulf, where the sea surface temperatures are so warm right now, and since that is an area of potential development that's popular this month, it's really nice to have the dust out there. We would kill for dust like this in August and September when the things really start to crank up, because that would help keep storms weak or keep storms from forming. That would be really nice, but that's just not how the system works.
And so then let me so what is the reason that we don't get this? We need this dust in August and September. Why don't we get it in those months?
It's just the way that the trade winds work and the storms that are over the Saharan, basically allowing the dust to get that far up in the atmosphere to get caught in the winds that carry it across the Atlantic, and that pattern gets interrupted as the seasons change and the tilt of the earth changes and the heating zones change a little bit, which drives all those greater wind patterns.
I guess you could say with this plume of dust, another one will bite the dust eventually. Guys, I'm here for the Hank's laughing. I'm here for the terrible puns, you guys. Brody Wesson, hashtag Hey Hank, coming your way, Hank. When do you think the tropical activity will start, and how long do you think the Saharan dust will be here?
Yeah, it's a great question. Sort of like Rebecca was just saying, that dust tends to stick around for the first part of the summer. So we're probably going to get these waves continuing to move across the Atlantic, I would think, through mid to late July, off and on. And then by August, you start to see that activity taper off. In terms of when the tropical season would pick up, I still look for late July to early August. We've had a couple of these systems, obviously, and wouldn't put it out of the question to see one or two more maybe that try to develop, sort of like where we have that wave right now down around Central America. But I really think this is going to be a year that we see this activity pick up in August and September a bit more than the past couple of years. Not that the past couple of years, I guess I should change that. The past couple of years obviously have been very active in August and September, but a lot of that activity has been storms that, of course, have developed a little bit closer in the Gulf and the Caribbean. I think this is a year that we may switch back at least a little bit, in part, to seeing some of those waves come off of Africa and develop into bigger storms a little bit farther out. So, by August, September, I think you're looking at those waves coming off. You're looking at some of those big storms that we've seen in the past that you sort of think about during peak tropical season rolling across the Atlantic. And then, of course, you're still going to have that, as we call it, homegrown threat as well here in the Gulf and Caribbean. So another active season forecast. I don't see any reason to doubt that. The dust will go away. You've got the La Nina. You have the warm ocean out there, and there's really nothing to impede the progress of these storms from developing as we go through the peak of this season. Obviously, here in Louisiana, we've had very active years over the past couple of years. To me, that trend has to change at some point just by, rules of statistics. I mean, we're not going to keep getting multiple storms hitting the state, I don't think, year after year. So I think the focus shifts a little bit more to the east, for the state of Florida, up the East Coast a little bit more than it has over the past couple of years. But still, at the end of the day, anybody probably from Beaumont on over towards Virginia Beach, I think, is in the target zone for potential landfalls this year.
As we look here at this graphic, taking a look at the NOAA forecast, the CSU forecast, plus your average year. These are important numbers, and make sure you take a good close look, because both NOAA and Colorado State University, guys, projecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5, maybe 6 major hurricanes. Now, that doesn't mean that every one of those hurricanes is going to have an impact here with us in the United States, but it just goes to show that we're just getting started as far as the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. How about Dan Evans? Hashtag Hey Amanda. And again, use any of the hashtags for any one of our meteorologists to have your comment featured here on screen, of course, powered by Handyman Roofing. And he asks, how long does it take for the Saharan dust to get here from its origin, and how long will it last?
That just depends on kind of the weather setup, but it's a 3,000-mile trek from the Sahara Desert, from Africa all the way across the Atlantic, and then for it to get to us here in the United States. Sometimes it's a week and a half. That's typically about average there, but sometimes it can get here a little bit faster. Sometimes it's a little slower depending on those winds, right? But how long it lasts depends on the weather pattern that's in place. Hank was kind of talking about it a little bit earlier. We've got this big ridge of high pressure, we call it, and there's not a lot of wind movement over the United States right now to kick any of this dust out. So it's just lingering overhead. That's why the skies are going to stay really hazy for the next couple of days, and it's why the heat isn't going anywhere. That's the big story. Besides the tropics, obviously we're talking about the tropics because this is tracking the tropics, but in the weather department, the heat is the big story across the southeast, and that dome of high pressure is also to blame for that. So it's keeping the dust around, and it's keeping the heat around too, because it's not going anywhere.
So let me ask you guys this, because our next question is an interesting one. Think of this dust as having a dusty kitchen, right? Eventually, this dust is going to get cleaned up, and kitchen's going to be clean. Once the kitchen is clean, does that just mean it's a free-for-all for tropical activity to occur? Because we have this question from Carmen Stone from WKRG's Facebook page in Mobile, Alabama, close to where Hank is located on the northern Gulf Coast. Hashtag HeyJB. How long is the dust supposed to last? And once it dissipates, are we expected to have an increase in tropical activity? I'll bring the entire team up. Once the kitchen is clean, you guys, is it just, do we expect a spike in tropical development to occur?
You still have to have the factors there for something to form, right? So yes, the dust has to mix out. So then we start to get more moisture in the atmosphere. Then you have to have another little spark, right? Like a tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa, or just some shower and thunderstorm activity starting to bubble up. That has to organize. So the other factors still have to be there. You still have to have those light winds in place as well for the system to organize. But as soon as we drop the dust, as soon as we clear out the kitchen, that's one factor that's not there anymore, helping to keep the system weak.
Let's get to this one. Anyone else to add on that point before we move on to the next question?
I was just going to say, once the kitchen's clean, you start cooking. Is that what you were going for then?
Yeah. How about some gumbo from New Orleans, Hank? Sounds. I don't
know if it's the right time of year for that, but I'll make you some.
Yeah, it's kind of hot. It is, but man, I love me some New Orleans cooking. Manuel, also from WKRG's Facebook page, hashtag HeyJB. Do you feel like Houston may get hit hard this year during hurricane season, seeing how hot things have gotten so fast? Is there any logic, Rebecca, to this comment from Emily talking about the heat? I mean, we're talking about record heat here in this country, and of course, much of the country under some kind of a heat wave advisory. So it's hot. And it's really hot out there. Does heat transfer to warmer water temperatures, which would then mean a more active season? Is that kind of what Emily is getting at here?
Sea surface temperatures are always a factor, but we're always hot in the Gulf, especially this time of the year and over the next couple of months. So I wouldn't necessarily attribute the heat wave that we're seeing right now to an increase in the possibility of Houston getting hit. What we're more concerned with actual direction of the storms is the high pressure that's typically over Bermuda. The position of that has a huge influence on whether the storms that are tracking across the Atlantic get slung into the Gulf or they sling up the east coast of the U.S. because air travels clockwise around a high pressure system. And so that's allowing the storm's interaction with that air that is moving clockwise around that giant high pressure over the Atlantic. It shifts slowly to the north during the season, and that's why we typically get those storms entering the Gulf and possibly getting towards Houston during the early parts of the season. And then that shifts and it starts to sling those storms closer to the east coast, and they don't make it as far south and into the Gulf. Other positioning with Houston would be what fronts are coming across the United States as a storm is approaching, because that also directs the storm, which coastline it ends up hitting in the Gulf once the storm does make it in there. So the heat is, while it's very, very offensive outside right now in terms of humidity, not necessarily going to equate a spike in storms. And it takes a long time for bodies of water like the Gulf to warm up. A day or two doesn't really have that much influence over the overall temperatures in the Gulf.
This is a last call for any of your hashtag-based questions out of our Facebook Live comment section. Again, you have a meteorologist right here in the palm of your hands, folks. If you'd like to ask a question to Rebecca, hashtag Hey Rebecca. Same for Hank, hashtag Hey Hank, or Amanda, hashtag Hey Amanda. So this is a final call for your questions here to the Facebook Live comment section. But Cliff asking this one, again, our Q&A powered by Handyman Roofing, hashtag HJB. Does this mean that later in the hurricane season will be worse, Hank? Does Saharan dust mean a more active season later, or does that not
really have more of an explosion later on? I wouldn't necessarily equate those two, but as I said, I think by August and September, things are going to be pretty primed and ready to go in terms of the water temperatures. You're talking about the overall wind pattern in the atmosphere. You're talking about these waves coming off of Africa at that point. I think it may extend a little bit later in the season into October than we normally see, just simply because of the warmer water. I wouldn't necessarily equate that, though, to the dust bottling things up early in the season. But I could definitely see a situation where we extend some of these storms a little bit later in the season. And you think about 2020, I mean, we had some of those Greek names coming in early November, of course. So, we could see a situation where that extends a little bit later. But, I just think at the end of the day, you've got a lot of factors out there that are going to lead to storms that, you have to keep an eye on, as always. But, certainly there's a couple of different issues out there. We've talked about the MJO on this show before. And, I know I've harped a lot of times over the past couple of years here locally, these homegrown storms, if you're in the right phase atmospherically, these storms that have intensified closer to the coast, we've seen that certainly the past couple of years. I think that's going to be another threat this year. If you're in the right phase for that to happen, we've seen these really ramp up. Ida was a great example last year. Sally a couple of years ago, within 100 to 200 miles of the coast. That to me is the biggest threat, in terms of the overall pattern, whether or not it happens earlier or later in the season. Maybe we shift things a little bit later just because the water temps are so warm, but not necessarily because of the dust.
Hank Allen joining us from WGNO, friend of the program across multiple seasons of Tracking the Tropics. Hank, before we wrap up this episode, what do you want your viewers here to know, and what are you expecting on the northern Gulf Coast? Hopefully, a very quiet 2022 season.
Boy, you got to hope so. I mean, it has been ridiculous the past couple of years, but, pretty much the same messages as always. Get that flood insurance. Still, a lot of people don't have it. The rates are going to go up. You want to be in the system before these rates go up, and then it's really hard to get in the system or hard to afford to be in the system. So get your flood insurance now, be in the system, make sure you're ready to go there. Start buying the supplies now. We've seen supply chain issues, obviously, in all facets of products and goods over the past year or so because of the pandemic. And so start purchasing the plywood or the canned goods or whatever you need, the bottled water, these supplies that you can get now, start stocking up on those because you don't know what's going to be available and what won't be if a storm's coming this way in the next 2 or 3 months. And then, otherwise, like I said, it's just going to be a matter of staying vigilant, keeping an eye on things. I personally think some areas that have kind of squeaked by over the past couple of years, a little bit farther east of us, may have a little bit better chance this year, but hopefully all the forecasts are wrong. I mean, it's not a guarantee, obviously, that we have these active seasons, but certainly the conditions are out there. So, everybody needs to get prepared now and make sure you're ready to go.
Make sure, too, that you give Hank Allen a follow over at the WGNO weather team. And also, too, you might see stuff like this. You might see some beautiful, sunny, or really hazy, but beautiful sunsets here thanks to this plume of Saharan dust that has arrived here.
If I could make one more comment,
sure.
Something we talked about in our hurricane special. I mean, obviously, we're all dealing with inflation and higher prices here. So just a heads up to everybody, if you haven't thought about that yet, it's, a hurricane evacuation for 5 or 6 days last year that may have run you $1,500 may run you $2,200 to $2,400 this year. So you got to plan financially as well in case you need to have an extended evacuation or something like that.
Good piece of advice, because we don't know what this summer is going to bring as far as the rise of inflation and what is happening in so many places across the United States. Big thanks again to Hank Allen and, of course, our Tracking the Tropics meteorology team with Amanda Holly and Rebecca Barry there on the top of your screen. Tracking the Tropics is live on trackingthetropics.tv every Wednesday. It's also on WFLAnow.com every Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central, during hurricane season. When a storm forms, when there's tropical activity that you need to know about, we are also live throughout the week. It doesn't just have to be on Wednesdays. We are live every day. We're always on standby, ready to let you know about tropical activity when it does occur here in our section of the planet. So we have meteorologists like Hank Allen on standby across the country to bring in their expertise to let you know what to expect as far as the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. I'd like to thank our entire Tracking the Tropics team. We will see you next Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern or sooner, depending on the tropical activity that occurs between now and then. We'll keep you posted here on trackingthetropics.tv. Thanks so much for joining us, folks. This has been Tracking the Tropics, powered by Handyman Roofing.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.